morning and welcome to day 42 of 100 Days of Sewing with Queenie Quilts. My name is Catherine Wilson and I'm your host. And today we are working on a project. So I decided I'm going to do the red and blue stack. So this stack has 50 different strips, 25 red and 25 blue it looks like. I've not actually counted them, but it looks like they're about half. So I'm going to turn you around and get started. All right, welcome back to the studio. So I have in front of me the 50 strips we're going to use today. And we're going to start by pulling the first one off and opening it up. And we're going to mark using the 45-degree angle here. We're just going to mark a diagonal line across it, making sure that the selvage is on the outside edge. And then we're going to mark all of them. So it doesn't really matter what color you mark with. This is sort of an orange chalk pen. Not sure if you can see that on camera, but it looks fine in person. I do jump back and forth between a regular pen, a white pen, and this orange one, just depending on what I've got available and what my fabric looks like. So I'm going to mark all of these here, all the way through the stack. And again, I'm just placing the 45 on the cut edge, basically, and marking a 45-degree angle. So, and all I'm really doing here is marking where I'm going to sew. So in a few minutes, I'm going to sew on that line, and this piece will become scrap. So I'm just going to mark all of these, and I'll meet you back here in just a minute. now that we have an entire pile of marked items, we're going to move to the sewing machine where we're going to do the next step for this project. We're back at the sewing machine, and I have a full bobbin below, and I'm ready to sew. So I have my 1/4 inch foot on here, and I have an unguided 1/4 inch foot. For this step, you're definitely going to want it unguided. It doesn't necessarily have to be a 1/4 inch foot though, because we're not really, at least on this step, going to use the 1/4 inch for measurement. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a base strip. So in this case, I'm going to take a blue base strip. I'm going to check it and make sure that this end that I'm going to sew on does not have the marker, the 45-degree angle marker, and it doesn't. So I'm going to put this one here. And then I'm going to take a red strip that does have the 45-degree angle marker. I'm going to put it on top. So like this. I'm going to overlap these. And basically I'm going to line up one end of that 45-degree mark with the edge of this strip here, and one edge of it with the bottom edge of this strip. And then I'm going to sew it. And what I'm doing there is I'm doing basically like I'm making binding. I'm just going to sew all of these strips, all 50 of them, into one long line. So I'm going to get started on that, and you can watch me do it. I'll see you in just a minute.
Press my face to
All right, now I've got these off the sewing machine, so I've sewn them on the diagonal. And now I'm just gonna clip these couple of threads and cut off this extra corner here. So I'll leave the connected piece, and that will end up looking like that. So it's gonna end up looking like red and blue diagonally joined stripes. That's what I want. So I'm gonna go clip those all off and trim off these little short corners, and then I will meet you at the ironing board. All right, guys, we're back and we're at my pressing station. Before we do much else, I want to show you what I've done here. So this is the front end of the strips where we started sewing. And I have pinned that end to my pressing mat. Now I've done that because it's very easy when you're making a big, huge pile of strips here that are being pressed to lose the end and then have to find it again. And we don't want these to twist. So I have pinned it down up in that corner, and I'll basically make my pile of fabrics up here on the right, upper right. So I'm just gonna press. Now, I don't really have to worry too much about this. There's no right or wrong direction. We're just trying to get out any of those creases that were caused by the storage of the fabric and press in this crease. It doesn't matter which way, doesn't matter which direction, but it needs to go all one way. So in this way, this one, it was already facing that way, so I just pressed it in towards the blue. It's not really gonna matter. We're just gonna press and keep piling, basically. Now this one looks like wants to turn towards the red, so we'll just turn it towards the red. Again, you're really just looking for the big wrinkles, the big ones you can feel and see. And this one looks like want to go to the blue. Here's that, what was the fold on the bolt. And there's the mid fold. And again, it doesn't matter which way they press, they just need to get pressed. And I'm using a non-steam iron, so just a really nice hot, I actually have it set on linen. So I get a nice crisp press there. Oops, get this one little, I don't even know if you can see those on camera or not. So I'm just going to keep pressing here until I'm done, and then I'll show you what's next. All right, so we're back at the pressing station, and I have this huge pile. This is the last strip that I was pressing. It's right side up, so there's its first join. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the end, right? And I'm going to take this end, and I'm going to take it to the pin that I put down before and put it on top. So they are now face together, right sides together, because this edge here on the right is where I am going to sew. And I need to move this huge pile, right, that are going to be very messy. So what I'm going to do is take this pin out that I know is right sides together, put the pin back in, holding those two ends together like that. So that when I pick this and take it to my sewing machine, hopefully I don't untangle it. So here we go, off to the sewing machine. Okay, I'm back at the sewing machine. I have my two pinned fabrics. Now I'm going to sew using a 1/4 inch seam along this right hand side of it. And as I pull, it's going to pull from two locations in this big long pile that's basically right below the camera. So hopefully you'll get a good view, and we'll see how long it takes. Now, I'll warn you right now, you need a full bobbin. We might even need to start a second bobbin because this seam is going to be 2,000 inches long. So, on that note, we're going to get started. So here we go. And I'm sewing with the 1/4 inch seam. And I'll put this on speed for you so you don't have to watch it at regular speed.
Press my face to the sun. Yes, I'll come back to you. Then I'll ask, what have we done under the sun? To be free, be away, big breath that you can't fake. Once you've begun, press my face to the back, all the pillars that stack, and hold up the sun. And hold up the sun. Yes, I'll come back to you. Then I'll ask, what have we done?
Okay, so we're back because it turns out you don't need to worry quite so much about the bobbin as you do about the camera battery. So ran out of camera battery, so we turned it off and now we're back. So let's get this finished. We're still sewing on the right hand side of these. Let's see where I stopped. Anyway, all right, back at it.
Yes, I'll come back to you. No, I won't ask where you run under the sun. Yes.
Okay, so I got this sewn all the way to the end. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna split it apart. So I've just got a little baby pair of scissors. I did go like 2 stitches too short from closing it completely. And now I'm gonna open it up like this, and I'm gonna pull it. Again, I'm gonna do that same deal, only this time I'm going to pin this to myself, this end. Just pinned it to my shirt, and now I pull this and open it as I go, because I'm going to do that same routine again to the right hand side, and I've set this set aside so I can find the end easily. So I'm just going to keep pulling, and keep pulling until I find the end. And it's going to take a while because there's 50 strips here, so I think I'm about 6 in, so keep going. Okay, so there's that end strip. Now, the one thing I'm going to do here, instead of just opening this and sewing directly on this red one, is I'm going to cut this at about 12 inches. And that's going to give me the ability to offset these strips a little bit better, because the first strip is going to be a different length than the others. So I'm just going to actually trim right here at this. There's like a little indentation from what was a fold at some point. I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to put these in my 2.5 inch scraps. I'm going to open this guy. I'm going to pull that pinned one, put those two together, and throw it under the needle again. You don't have to be super exact here. If your cut isn't straight, it's no big deal. And so this time, as I'm sewing, I'm going to have 2 strips on the top and 2 strips on the bottom. But my diagonal lines are not going to line up every time like they did last time. So last time, the 2 of them would be together. One going one way and one the other as I was sewing. This time, there's one here on the bottom set, and the one here on the top set is offset by about 10 inches or so. So there's where I'm hitting the first set, the bottom one. Here's where I'm hitting the top set. So now the key is to make sure that you're opening the bottom fabric pair as you're going, which is not hard. It just takes paying attention. So I tend to sew about 18 inches and then back off and correct. Now, one thing I didn't do, which I probably should have thinking about it, is check on that bobbin and see where we are. It's a lot easier to just fill a new bobbin or put in a new bobbin. At the start, rather than letting it run out. So I just want to make sure I pay attention, since I didn't do that this time. Although, looks like I've got plenty of bobbin on there, to be honest. So. So I'm just going to keep going. Basically making my 2s into 4s. And again, making sure I open those, both top and bottom, so I don't somehow sew myself into a 2, which I have done. Now, we're going to basically use the same process over and over again. So these 2s are becoming 4s. The next go around, the 4s, the 2 4s will become 8s. Then 16s, and then 32s. So once they get to about 8s, they become a little bit easier, just because of their weight, to open them. They then become a little harder to manage on this side because they get large and heavy. So. You can tell as you start to get close to the end, it starts to get a little harder. Well, harder to get them straight. That's because it starts to sort of double back on itself. Or in this case, get tangled with the ones that are already sewn below. Where have you been? In the garage? Coming back to work? Hi, studio assistant. How are you? What you doing? you come to get some pets? Some cuddles? What's the question? That's good. I'm still working on my video. Okay, so I've just finished sewing this edge, and now I'm going to open this one up. And this is what's going to happen every time you get to an edge. You're going to have a repeat of the last two strips, just for a short period. That's kind of how this pattern works. So now I'm going to do that same thing I did last time. I'm going to pin this one to my shirt so I don't lose it, and find the other end and then sew on the right hand side. So there you go. That's the original end where the two that were sewn together touch. And now I'm going to take this end that's pinned to my shirt and line it up here. Again, when you do these corners, they don't have to be lined up perfectly. You're going to trim them square at the end. And then back to sewing.
Yes, I'll come back to you. No, I won't ask where you run under the sun. Yes, I'll come back to you. Then I'll ask, what have we done under the sun? To be free, be away, big breath that you
Okay, so we're down to the next one. Gonna do the same thing. Just gonna cut this across and then set them up together. So, just gonna use my little skinny scissors here. I didn't do a very good job. Oh, I'm gonna make it. I went a little far when I was sewing this one, so I didn't quite do it right. That's okay. That's the joy of this pattern. So, I'm just cutting these on that fold. And again, you don't have to be super perfect about it because we're gonna trim it up and square it up later. So I'm just gonna cut those. Now this time, I'm not gonna pin it to myself, it's getting pretty big. So it's also getting easier to find that other end because it's not nearly as far away. So I'm just gonna hold on to it, find the other end, and keep going. There's that other end. And so this time, 8 will become 16. All right, so now our 8 has become 16. We're gonna cut it one more time and sew it one more time to make 16 into 32. And then this quilt is done. All right, so this one's now finished. I'm just gonna trim this up and I'll meet you over at the design board in just a minute. Good evening and welcome back. It is the end of day 42 and our masterpiece is on the wall. So this is what we made earlier. It measures about 62.5 by 62.5. Right now, it isn't quite square. It isn't quite straight and I have not straightened it up. So I'll lose a little bit, but essentially it's gonna be a little over 60 inches square, all said and done. So I'm super happy with it. I'm gonna put a little skinny border and then a nice 6.5 inch border, and that'll make it a good size for the couch. So it's a quick and easy, and pretty straightforward. More importantly, you really can't mess it up. Just makes it easy and quick, and is a great gift if you need something easy and quick. So just so for everyone's reference, if I'm not filming, I can literally make this quilt up to this point in about an hour. And then another hour to put some borders on it, a couple of hours to get it quilted and bound. So this also is a really great one to put Minky on the back from a size perspective. So I'll often do that. Something nice and loose in terms of quilting, and it'll be done in just a few hours. So this is phase 1 or option 1 for the Jelly Roll Race quilt. I'll give you a few more options in the next couple of weeks as you look at a couple of other ones. All right, until then, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night.